I'm delighted to be joined this morning by our very own Senator Gary Peters, who is working tremendously to make sure that the residents of Michigan are represented, and not just Michigan, but just across our country, that people are being properly represented in a time where we know representation not only counts, but it's something that's not necessarily happening at the top. So, Senator Peters, welcome. How are you?
Well, thank you, Councilmember Ayers. I'm Gary to you. We've known each other a long time, and everybody can call me Gary, but you and I have been friends for a long time, and it's great to be with you again. I was reminiscing with you before this, and being in person with your town hall that you have
Mhm.
in Detroit, and that was a great event. I hope we can do that again. Hopefully, we'll all be able to come together sooner rather than later. I think we're all wishing for that. But I
Yes.
appreciate this opportunity, Councilmember Ayers, or Janeé, if I may call you that,
Yes.
to talk about some things that are happening in Washington. And, I've been in the middle of all this in my role as the ranking member. I'm the ranking Democrat on the Senate Homeland Security Committee and Government Affairs, which means I oversee FEMA. And as you know, the
Mhm.
Federal Emergency Management are the ones that are coordinating the federal response. So we're on the phone regularly. I was with the administrator yesterday on the phone talking about personal protection equipment and testing and how do we get more testing supplies, all of those things that are we have to get in order for us to get through this crisis. And particularly in the city of Detroit that has been particularly hard hit, how do we wrap our arms around to really focus more and more resources into the city and other hotspots like Detroit around the country. But I know one issue that you wanted me to talk about is the HEROES Act that
Yes.
I've put forward and proposal to deal with our heroes who are in necessary jobs that are going to work. Certainly, we want to help small businesses. I've been very involved in the payroll protection program with small businesses and keeping businesses going so we can get through it. And to make sure that folks who are unemployed can have a roof over their head and food on the table, expanding unemployment benefits dramatically. But I want to make sure we're taking care of those folks who have to go to work every day.
That's
They are
right.
in absolutely necessary jobs. They don't have the luxury of being able to work from home or to shelter in place and to be able to use online telework kinds of programs. They have to go there to earn a living, and more importantly for society, we need them. They're absolutely essential jobs. We can't function without the work that they do. And in addition to getting our thanks, which they deserve, and we should thank them every time we see them as we go out, they also deserve to have some money in their pocket, extra money to deal with the fact that they're putting themselves at
Mhm.
risk, they're putting their families at risk. And so, I've been proposing this HEROES Act, and we've got some good news. We'll report on that, but so far. But the HEROES Act basically says if you are in one of those necessary jobs and you're interacting with the public and you're putting yourself and your families at risk, you should get additional pay. Basically, patterned after hazard pay that we have in a number of jobs or the US military. You get paid
Mhm.
more if you're in a combat zone than if you're not because you're at greater risk and you get hazard pay. And so think of folks there and how we define that. And it has to be defined a lot broader than what usually comes to mind for people. When we think of folks in necessary jobs, we think of our doctors and nurses and medical techs. They are surely all heroes. We need them to go to work to make sure they're taking care of folks. We need to keep them healthy. We've got to make sure they have personal protection equipment and
Mhm.
the tools necessary. But the list is a lot broader than that. And when you think of a hospital, it's also the custodial staff and the janitors that are in the hospital. If they don't go to work every day, if they're not making sure that that hospital is spotless and it's sterilized, it doesn't function. You have to have those jobs. Those jobs are absolutely critical. And yet, when they go to work every day, they put themselves at risk. And when they go home at night, they put their families at risk.
That's right.
Think of other jobs like that. As we shelter in place, those of us fortunate to be able to do that, we still need to go to the grocery store. If we don't have food on our table, we can't shelter in place. And we have
Mhm.
grocery store workers who are stocking the shelves, who are working day in and day out to make sure that we can continue to survive. But they're putting themselves at risk. Folks in the whole supply chain. When thinking about pharmacies, you think of our transit folks who you have to ride on transit and the people
Right.
who are there making sure people can get from point A to point B. Those are putting themselves at risk to do that vital job. Our
Absolutely.
postal workers, folks who are delivering the mail and getting it to every day. We got to have postal workers. So Those folks should all qualify. And under this proposal, if you are in one of those jobs, you would receive an additional $13 an hour on top of whatever your regular pay is. So you get your regular pay, and then
Mhm.
you get a bonus of 13 hours hour above that, and it'll run through start from when the pandemic started to win wherever this comes to an end. Hopefully sooner
So,
rather than later, but as long as it lasts, folks would be able to get that additional pay.
so it is retroactive.
Yeah, that's the way I've proposed it, and we've got to make sure we're going to be able to get that. It's not a done deal, obviously. It's in the
Right.
proposal, but it should be. You folks have been putting themselves at risk from the beginning. We shouldn't treat it
Absolutely.
any differently. So that's the way that I view it, and the House proposal deals with some of that.
So do we have a defined list yet of, these are the people that are eligible for the Heroes Fund?
Well, we do, and the list is still being worked through. And I'll
Mhm.
say that the good news is that the proposal that I've been talking about is actually part of the House proposal over in the House. They
Mhm.
put together a Heroes proposal. They haven't voted on it yet. We're expecting them to vote shortly, but that's been put out. And on that list, I mean, they've got folks, as I mentioned, like healthcare, first responders, our police and fire and other folks who are out there
Sure.
on the front lines, social services, food supply, transit, janitorial, waste management folks, postal service, uh, tribal governments, election support, journalism. I mean, it's folks that we've got to have out there that
Okay.
are critical for it. So the House has put together that list. We're also going to be working that list, and I'm hearing from other folks that we want to make sure are part of it. I mean, we're thinking about people in our corrections facilities as well,
Mhm.
where are definitely our hotspots right now, people who are working there. These are folks that we need to make sure are being treated fairly. And in my mind, being fairly means you get hazard pay.
That's right. So what's the next step for the proposal?
So the proposal is now before the House. The House will vote on it, and it could come shortly. I haven't heard today if they're coming back Friday, but there was some talk about that happening. If not, it'll vote, I think, fairly quickly in the House, and then it'll come to the Senate. And we are pushing Mitch McConnell, who is the leader, to have us move forward on additional help to deal with the COVID-19. Right now, he's saying he's not interested in doing that. So we're going to put
Mhm.
as much pressure as we can to say people are hurting out there. They're continuing to hurt. We
Mhm.
need to take action, and we need to move this bill. And when the House sends it to the U.S. Senate, we have to take it up. But right now, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans, as you know, control the floor of the Senate, and so we're going to have to continue to put pressure on them.
Got it. Well, I know that you have to go to the floor, so I don't want to take up much more of your time, but it was just, I mean, it was my privilege, my pleasure rather, to make sure that we sent a resolution from City Council that I sponsored to make sure that we support you in your efforts. Like I said, we are friends, and I am proud to call you a friend because you fight for people, you have a good heart, and I think that this is just extremely important. And we're not going to keep you because we need you on that floor so you can fight
Uh,
for our heroes. And so, thank you, Gary. Thank you for being with us.
Well, Janae, thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for being such a passionate and strong fighter for the people in the city of Detroit. And that resolution you sent, all that is important. It's important for my colleagues to know that people back in our states care
Right.
deeply about this. There's unified support for it, and it's doing the right thing. And
That's
we
right.
have to make sure we step up and do the right thing. So, thank you for always being a champion for the people of Detroit and being so passionate. And you stay safe and healthy, and I look forward to seeing you in person sooner rather
Yes.
than later.
All right. All right. Well, we'll pray for you and have you girded up while you walk onto that floor with those folks. So
Take care, Janae.
thank you. Take care.